Half Size Me Flashback episode 102, brought to you by the amazing Half Size Me Academy. To join us, go to halfsizeme.com/join. And today I am going to be sharing episode number 102 from back in the vault of time. And this was with John Buchanans. He was somebody who was willing to share his weight loss journey with us. And he actually, at the time we recorded this, had his own podcast called Let's Reverse Obesity. And actually, what was great about this episode is not only did he talk about weight loss, but how he juggled that goal with also doing a podcast at the same time. So he shared that his weight started as a struggle point back in childhood. And I have a lot of people asking me, do you ever interview men? I have a lot of males that I've interviewed in the past for the show. And that's why you get to hear this one today. So you get to hear a male's perspective. All right. You enjoy this episode, flashback episode number 102 with John Buchanans, and I will be back with you next week. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have a wonderful treat for you. I have John Buchanans from Let's Reverse Obesity. John, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, I am so thrilled to have you here. And it's funny, I've kind of opened up about this. I never really listened to podcasts, believe it or not. And this last summer, I ended up taking kind of a hiatus from working out for about a week. And I decided, I'll try out this whole listening to podcast business. And so I went through Alan's and I went through yours and some other ones. And it was funny. I really started to connect, with a lot of your story, and I really wanted to bring you on. So I have, of course, had a chance to listen to your stuff and check out your website, but there might be some listeners out there that haven't. So could you kind of fill everybody in as to when your weight started to become an issue for you?
Well, I've been heavy my entire life, but it seemed to be, I guess, when I got married, it seemed to balloon up a little bit, and I'm an emotional eater. So, I was having issues with work and issues at home and stuff like that. And I'm a fast food junkie. So it was just so easy. And I just ballooned up to a point where I couldn't even move. I mean, I had to go to my daughter's soccer game, and it was 100 yards to where the field was. And by the time I got there, I was completely out of breath. And I said, this is really no way to live. I have to change this. And I didn't even know how much I weighed. Because most scales only go up to 300 pounds, and I knew I was over 300 pounds. And I was at work one day, and I was walking across coming in the back of the building, and they had a scale there for freight. So I stepped on it, and it was 490 pounds. I almost fainted because I was 10 pounds away from being a quarter ton. I couldn't believe it. And that's when I knew that I had to change something, anything.
I'm just curious, what prompted you to want to step on that scale that day? Because so many times when we get to be that large, and, I was in the same boat. I couldn't weigh myself on most home-based scales because I had actually crossed over 300 pounds. What pushed you that day to decide to step on that scale?
Honestly, because I knew it was over 400 pounds. I figured I was over 400 pounds, and I knew I could get an accurate weight from it. So, because I had not only, most scales only go up to 300. I had bought a scale that went up to 450 pounds. And when I stood on it, it said OL, which meant overload. I was like, are you kidding me? So I had to so then I stepped on it. And when I found out I was 490, it's a moment that you actually can feel the blood running out of your head. So I've tried every diet I've been on, you name it, I've been on it. So I figured nothing seems to be working. I need to find something that I can do where I'll lose weight because I can't really exercise as of yet. And I found, to go through research, because I say I'm a Google scholar, I found through research that basically a low carb diet would help. So that's what I did. And I knocked off about 40 pounds. And then I started to go back again. I said, I just can't do this. I need to do something to kind of keep myself motivated through this. So, like you, not knowing much about podcasting, I decided I got an iPhone that said podcasting. So I looked at it and I was like, I wonder how you can do a podcast. So I went to the internet and I looked up how to podcast, and I found Cliff Ravenscraft, and he basically taught me how to podcast. So when we were looking for something to do, I said, well, I'd really like to journal my weight loss and the issues I have with weight loss. And he says, that's a good idea. So I decided to launch Let's Reverse Obesity about a year ago. Now, here's the thing. Most people lose the weight and then they come back and tell you how they did it. Not me. I decided to try this, and I'm working on the fly here. So I'm having problems in real time. And it has become an issue as far as the podcast, because it's hard to share when you don't even know what to share or what your issues are. So the podcast has been spotty, but right now I've come to a point now where I'm going and doing a complete restart for everything I've learned from the past. And I'm just going to go point by point and just go right through everything I've learned through myself and the issues that I've had with myself. Because, like I said, with the holidays coming up and having to move myself and, taking a new job, and that job was something that I had to work overnights with. My sleep was all screwed up. You just fall right off the train, and then, you got to get back on again. So this is how I'm going to do it. Just restart, and this time try to actually learn from my mistakes and hopefully bring some people with me.
What's really interesting is, first off, I commend you and anybody else that chooses to lose basically half of your body weight and try and do a podcast while doing it. I've gone through the experience of that amount of weight loss, and what you're going through is completely normal and completely natural. That's just part of the process, but that's not what you see on TV when you watch like The Biggest Loser. You're seeing these people drop huge amounts of weight week in and week out. They don't deal with real life. And I think it's one of those things that it's an audacious task to be losing that much weight and be attempting to do a podcast about it, because all those, like you said, all those things that happen are going to affect, what you're trying to do. So I applaud you for attempting to do that, because that is a huge goal, I think.
No, I don't recommend it for anybody else, to be quite honest with you. Because what happened with me was Pandora's box opened up. And what the real issues that I was having started to pour out. And I got a chance to turn some things around in my life that I didn't even know were bothering me. And to me, it seems like it's more, weight loss is more emotional. Everybody talks about calories and exercise. Diet and exercise. What if I eat this or if I exercise about that? That's not, for me, that's not the issue. It wasn't what I was eating. It was what was eating me, which drove me to eat. And once I started to get some of that under control, it was a lot easier to work as a plan and set up new goals and set up new habits, because you have to change your lifestyle. Everybody wants to get on a diet, lose this weight so they can go back to what? The lifestyle that made you this way in the first place. Because I guarantee you, if you go off the plan that you were living before, you will gain your weight back. If you go back to the lifestyle that you were leading when you gained all this weight, you're going to gain weight. It just makes sense. So you really have to change that. And just, I look at it this way: progress, not perfection. And one day at a time, and just be better than I was the day before. And if I make a mistake, not get excited about it. Just start over again. It's no big deal. That's how I work it.
And I think really the whole process you've gone through, like I said, it's just a natural progression. We all start out really strong. We start out focusing on the food and on the exercise. And as I was listening back, because it was great, because I could actually listen to almost all your podcasts back to back, and I could see the progression. You start out really strong. You're focusing on the calories. You're focusing on the fitness. And then as that, you get past that kind of honeymoon phase, then it really starts to sink in that, wait a minute, this is a long time I'm going to be doing this. And then you start to kind of really analyze why. And then, of course, there is going to be emotional triggers that happen in there, and you're going to feel the need to eat. So my question to you is how did you realize personally for yourself that the emotional issues and the binge eating had to be dealt with either simultaneously as you were trying to lose the weight, or even possibly before real substantial weight loss would start to happen for you?
Well, if you go to my podcast and you listen to the first 6 episodes, I call that the mini series on how a diet fails. Like you said, I was all excited. I was losing weight. Everything was great. Then what happened was there was things going on that I couldn't control. And being a reasonably sound mind person, I'm trying to figure out how I can still eat fast food and lose weight. I'm trying to make this work in my mind. And I finally had to step back and say, really, what are you doing here? What's going on? Here it is for me, and being a guy, being a man, we are not allowed to show our feelings. All right. we have to show manly feelings because we're men. We're not allowed to show every feeling because some feelings are labeled as feminine. Men are allowed to show anger. They're allowed to show happiness. They're allowed to show indifference. They can't really show sadness or panic or sorrow. These feelings are not supposed to be feelings that men have. And we're from young men, we're taught that we're not allowed to show these feelings. We have to suppress those feelings. So what was happening was when I stopped eating, that's how I medicated. That's how I suppressed my feelings with eating. So all of a sudden, I had all these urges, uncontrollable urges, to be quite honest with you, that scared me. And I said, well, I better get back into this and try to figure out what's going on, what's the issues that I'm having. And I talked to some friends that had some background in, psychology, and they just said, you need to start feeling your feelings. Here's the other thing that was great about the podcast. If I was having an issue, I could look it up, find somebody who would talk about it, call up and interview them about it. I interviewed Dr. Nina Seville, and I also talked to Sean Webb, who has an amazing website and podcast about learning how to deal with feelings. It actually basically changed my life. So just being able to do that has helped me. And then the other thing is, and I'm sure you find out too, that just when you don't think you can do this anymore, someone sends you an email or a phone message or a Facebook message and says, I've just listened to your podcast and you really have inspired me to do this. And I'm like, well, I can't quit now. I'm going to let this guy down. Or I'm going to let this gal down. I can't do it. I have to try to stick it out and do something here. So it does, as much as I hope that I help people, they help me. It's a give and take.
And one of the things is interesting. You mentioned that when you had been overweight your entire life, and obviously your upbringing has really impacted you and how you deal with your emotions. When you look back at your childhood now and reflect, do you see the unhealthy relationships and maybe when they formed with food in regards to how you were raised in order to deal with your emotions?
Yes, because as a child, I'm 6 foot tall now, but I was always big for my age. And I was put in school at an early age. And to be honest with you, I was very immature for my age. So I was pushed to be in a plan in a grade where the kids were older than me and I wasn't on the same emotional level than I was. So back then, bullying was just, no one even paid attention to it. Now, as much as they pay attention to who in school, back when I was in school, you had to fend for yourself. So from that point on, I had to basically figure out how to handle that. And it was where I would kind of retract. The only thing that really gave me pleasure was food. Now, here's the other thing. I come from a family that has addiction on both sides. Alcohol, drugs. That doesn't do anything for me. Alcohol doesn't do anything for me. Drugs doesn't do anything for me. My medication of choice is food. For some reason, I have no idea why, but that's where it came from.
I actually have the exact same situation. I have both types of addictions in my family as well. And one of the things, as I was really dealing with my binge eating, and I don't know if you had this moment, where I could look back and see how one or both of my parents would binge eat to deal with their own stress regarding jobs or anything, that would have been a stressful situation. And to me, that was normal. Watching somebody eating 4 or 5 Big Macs in a sitting and shoving the wrappers under their seat was normal. I didn't think anything of it. But now I see that wasn't a healthy way. Was that ever demonstrated in front of you in regards to dealing with emotions?
It's funny. I guess my childhood was really maybe late 60s, early 70s. So back then, everything was suppressed. My father or my mother, she was probably more anorexic than anything else. She would never eat. And we didn't, she would cook for us and everything. And she would say, here, eat, you got to eat. But I never really remember seeing her sit down and eat a real meal with us. I mean, that's how I remember it. It's probably she did, but I just don't really remember it. And my father, he worked a lot. So when he would come home or, he was someone that did things. My father was kind of a speed junkie. He was into racing and making things go fast. So where he got his pleasures was from that. So we kind of had like a separated family. We didn't really have the whole sit down and eat together and do that. So I spent most of my time with my father. So I guess that's where I learned how to eat, because we were always out doing something. So it was stop and get a sandwich or get fast food or something like that, eat on the run. We didn't really sit down and have planned meals. So I think that's where it started.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes I think just watching those disordered relationships, whether it be with food or even just communication in general, I think that can have a huge impact on children. You're never taught, okay, this is how you feel. This is what you should or shouldn't do about it, aside from, like you said, dealing with it in an unhealthy way.
I think that growing up now, if I could go back and tell young John something, the first thing I would say was just go with, your heart, because I wasn't a big fan of eating out like that. And the other thing I would have to tell myself is to forgive yourself for when you make mistakes. That was my biggest problem. If as a young child, being pushed through school and working, I worked for my family too. So they were harder on you, when you worked for them than they would be on a regular employee. I used to take that to heart, and that feeling of guilt would always be in the back of my mind. And that's what I dealt with a lot. And that's how I used to do. But that's what would basically fuel my binge eating. So if I could just to go back and say anything, it's like, listen, it's not the end of the world. They can't kill you for it. Forgive yourself and move on. And that's what I try to do every day now. If I make a mistake or do something like that, learn from it, forgive myself, and just move on. You can't go back and change the past.
And one of the things that you mentioned quite a bit in your podcast is the fact that you like to troubleshoot problems. And that's very typical of people who work with machines. You have to be able to troubleshoot, figure out where the problem's coming from based on evidence that you're seeing on one end. When you're thinking and looking at your own weight loss situation, and say you're thinking about other people who maybe have about half of their body weight that they need to lose, what steps could they start to take to maybe troubleshoot where the problem with food might be coming from, in your opinion?
I definitely say you have to go to the source inside. It's hard to deal with your deepest monsters. I think if I was going to talk to somebody else who had to lose that much weight, I would just say, what is making you stay in this condition? What are you eating? How are you eating? And why are you eating? It's more why than anything else. The why you're eating is the issue. Because even now, like I said, I'm going back through this whole restart. And it's because I got complacent and overconfident. I was like, I know what I'm doing here. I've lost 108 pounds and I should be fine. And, I'll just keep doing. And then something would happen one day and you'd go, okay, well, I'll get back on plan tomorrow. And that tomorrow didn't start. I didn't start to get back into that. And I know what to do. I know how to plan my meals and pre-cook my food and, plan meals ahead, one day ahead, and I know how to do everything. So I had to get back and see why I was having this issue. And one of the things that for me was the lack of sleep. Basically, I had a marriage breakup. So there's that loneliness factor. There was an anger factor, and all that all rolled up together just fueled my urge to eat again, to medicate again. So the thing is to find out the why. Once you find out the why, the how is not easy, but obtainable.
I cannot agree more with that. And the why, let's come back to that for a second, because obviously you've pivoted in this whole process, again, going from just strictly food and exercise to realizing there was more going on. Now that you're aware of it, and for myself, I ended up going to therapy for a while to kind of deal with some of the issues that I had left over from childhood that ultimately parlayed into my eating issues. What exactly are you doing different now in order to deal with the emotional side and the why, in order to start moving you into a more permanent, healthy place?
I got to realize that I can't control everything, that sometimes you're going to be lonely. But that doesn't mean you have to stay that way. What I try to do now is I try to get out and help other people in other areas. And it could be with weight loss. I strike up conversations all the time with people about weight loss. And you start talking and we're all in the same boat. We all have the same problems. We all have the same issues. So if I can get into a situation like that where I can talk to other people or get out and help serve, that's what I try to do. sitting home and having a pity party saying, oh, well, I can't find anybody, or, I should have done this, or I should have done that. And then sometimes you think, well, your ex really wasn't that bad. Maybe you should start that relationship back up again. And then all of a sudden that record scratch in your head goes off like, what? So you basically have to find out the issues that you're having and make a plan, recognize them, and try to make a plan. And even when you start to feel sad or tired, realize that and say, step away from it. The thing is, for me, is I have to make sure that I do everything to set everything up so I can continue to work on my plan. I have to buy food. I have to cook food. I have to have it here. Because the other thing is, if you allow yourself not to have that, that is your own mind basically sabotaging your plan. If you don't have food, well, I have to go get some food. Well, what am I going to get? Well, for me, that's a perfect example or a perfect opportunity to go get fast food. So I can't do that anymore. My whole goal right now is not to eat anything that comes out of a drive-through window. If you can pass it through a window, I'm not allowed to eat it. So that's how I start.
And that was actually one of the things that popped into my mind as I was listening to all of your podcast episodes. And again, I've been there, I've gone through it, I've had very similar situations as to what you've gone through. And what came to mind is it doesn't always have to be so extreme. Like, we don't have to, completely cut our carbs way back or go down to 800 calories or do these extreme things. Just one simple thing, like you said, like cutting out the fast food. If you could do that, you would just start naturally losing weight, and then you could add a new thing and every couple weeks. And so that was going to be my question for you is do you think that that's more of a sustainable way for you to move forward?
Well, what I try not to do is create a vacuum. In other words, if I say, okay, I'm not allowed to eat anything that comes out of a drive-through window, I have to be able to replace that. So what I do is I make sure I'm big on apples and pineapples. I like that. So I make sure I have that in the house. I make sure that I have chicken that I cook and that's in the house. So what I try to do is if I eat more, what I call one ingredients food, chicken, what's in chicken? Chicken. What's in an apple? Apple. If I eat more one ingredient food, I feel better. Because it does actually makes me feel better. My arthritis feels better, and that I have in my knees and issues like that. And that way, I don't have those cravings. I don't have those cravings. And when I start to have those cravings, then I know that it's not food that I'm hungry for. Here's how I can tell whether it's a real food hunger or an emotional hunger. If it's a food hunger. Thank you so much for checking out this episode, number 102 with John Buchanans. If you would like to finish this episode, please become a podcast premium subscriber. It is so inexpensive and it gives you so much extra wonderful content to listen to. It's a way to say, hey, Heather, thank you so much for the show. I'm glad that you've been around doing this since 2012. I cannot believe it's been that long. And it's an opportunity for you to go back through the archive and listen to some really fantastic interviews. So if you would like to finish this episode, number 102, please go and sign up at halfsizeme.com/fan, and you can get this and so much more. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to visit halfsizeme.com. Check back often for your daily dose of inspiration because you are worth it.
The information you hear on this podcast is for informational purposes only. The host is not a medical professional. You should always consult with your doctor, nurse, or other certified health professional before beginning any diet or fitness program.